So when I talk about the muscles of the body, we use some anatomical terminology, anterior and posterior. When we say anterior, we're referring to the front of the body. So the anterior muscles would be the muscles that you can see on the front of the body. If we say posterior muscles, then obviously we're talking about the muscles that you can see on the rear of the body. So first of all, we're going to talk about the anterior muscles and what movements or joint actions that they're responsible for. So first of all, let's start with the chest. So we don't call it chest muscles, we call it pectorals, or even more specifically, pectoralis major. And the pectoralis major is responsible for horizontal flexion of the upper arm. So if you think about any sort of pressing movement, we've got some horizontal flexion going on there. So a push-up, a bench press, a dumbbell chest press, all those exercises, horizontal flexion, that's working your pectoralis major. So that's the pectoralis major. And then in the rest of the torso, we've got our abdominals. Again, the more technical term is the rectus abdominis. And we normally call them just abs, don't we? And the rectus abdominis is responsible for flexion of your torso. So if you're doing ab curls, sit-ups, anything where you flex your torso, that's going to be working on the rectus abdominis. Now around the same area, we've got some more diagonal muscles here where we have the external obliques. And the external obliques are responsible for any kind of rotational movement in the torso. So if you were doing, any sort of wood chop, so whether it's a kettlebell wood chop or maybe on a cable machine, swinging a baseball bat, anything rotational, maybe doing some oblique curls, that's going to work your external obliques. So we've got the rectus abdominis, the external obliques, pectoralis major, and then moving into this part of the arm, the shoulders, we have our deltoids. And the deltoids are responsible for shoulder abduction, horizontal extension, the rear part of the shoulder is, and also flexion of the shoulder. So if we're doing any sort of pressing movement, and the deltoids are going to be getting involved, whether it's pressing out in front or pressing above your head or your lateral raises. So that's our deltoids. Okay, moving down to the lower body now. So we're still in the anterior. We're going to look at the lower body. We've got the muscles of the thigh, and there are quadriceps. And the quadriceps are responsible for extension of the knee. So if your knee's flexed and you extend your knee, then the quadriceps are responsible for that. And if you think about coming, if you're sat down, if you're sat on a chair and you stand up out of your chair, your thigh extends, your knee extends, so that's working your quadriceps. Now, we've also got muscles in the front of our lower leg called the tibialis anterior, and they're responsible for dorsiflexion. So when I bring my toes towards me, dorsiflexion. And we don't really have to do that under a lot of load, which is why the muscles there are very, very small. Think about the calves, they have to push off on the floor, much, much bigger muscles. But the tibialis anterior is much, much smaller. So that's the muscles of the anterior muscles. So let's look at the muscles of the posterior now. The posterior muscles, we have, starting with the upper back, we have the trapezius, which we mentioned before. The trapezius, shaped like a trapezius, that's where it gets the name from, responsible for quite a few things because it will elevate the shoulder girdle, it will retract the shoulder girdle, and it will descend the shoulder girdle. And they're big, we call them fixator muscles, so they're muscles that prevent unwanted movement. So if we're doing anything that involves pressing or even a bicep curl, the trapezius muscles will stabilize your shoulder girdle and prevent any unwanted movement. So even carrying some shopping bags, they're stabilizing the shoulder girdle during that. So that's our trapezius. Now then, just below the trapezius, we've got these huge big muscles in our back called the latissimus dorsi. Now we normally just call those lats because that's a long word to keep using. But your latissimus dorsi got big job. Lots of pulling movements they're responsible for. So whether it's pulling your body up to a bar and doing a chin up or a pull up, doing the rows, single arm rows, bent over barbell rows, seated rows on a resistance machine. So just think about pulling movements are going to be using the latissimus dorsi. Then if we go further down, we've got a big muscle at the bottom of the back called the erector spinae, and this one's responsible for extending the spine. So our abdominals, we said, flex the spine, but the erector spinae will extend the spine. Then below that, we've got our gluteals. Again, the longer word for that is the gluteus maximus. That's the muscles of the bum. And they're responsible for hip extension. So a bit like when I start talking about getting out of a chair, we use our quadriceps to extend our knee. Our glutes extend our hips. So getting out of a chair, coming out of a squat, jumping, that's going to be the hips that are that's going to be the glutes that are responsible for that, the gluteus maximus. Below the gluteus maximus, we've got the muscles of the back of the thigh, and they're the hamstrings. And the hamstrings, they actually have two jobs. They assist with extension of the thigh. So again, when we're standing up, coming out of a squat, jumping, deadlifting, your hamstrings assist with that movement. They assist with the hip extension. But they're also responsible for knee flexion. So whenever we bring that heel to the back of the thigh, that's knee flexion, and that's the hamstrings doing that. Then below the hamstrings, we've got the muscles of the calves, and we have two muscles in that area. We've got the gastrocnemius, which is a big muscle. The sort of entire calf belly is really the gastrocnemius, and that's responsible for plantar flexion. So when you're standing up on your toes, that would be your gastrocnemius. You know, when you jump, you point your toes. When you run, you point your toes. So your gastrocnemius is doing all that stuff. Now the soleus is also involved with that. Excuse me. The soleus assists with that too. It's a smaller muscle, and it's located behind the gastrocnemius, so you can't really see it very well whenever you look at a diagram of the muscles on the body. So that's the posterior muscles. Oh, one more. Almost forgot. My best muscle as well. How did I forget? My triceps. So triceps actually make up the sort of 2/3 of your arm, and they're found on the rear of the arm. So when you're doing any kind of pressing movements, again, your triceps usually are assisting with that because they extend the elbow. So if you're doing some tricep push downs, it's your triceps. If you're doing close push-ups, close press, tricep dips, all that sort of stuff, that's working your triceps. Pretty sure that's the lot. Just check myself out in the mirror. Yeah,